Imagine this. The deadliest predator in the known galaxy, a beast so terrifying that whole fleets turned and ran at the mere whisper of its name, curled up to sleep beside a lone human. Sounds impossible? Stick around because you're about to hear the story of a man who treated the galaxy's nightmare like an old friend. And before we begin, make sure to hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in this unbelievable saga. Cale Draven adjusted the straps of his pack and pushed through the overgrowth, each step of his boots muffled by moss. He wasn't remarkable to look at: short-cropped dark hair, a scar across one cheek from a broken piece of shrapnel, and the lean, hardened build of a man who had spent too much time on the edges of civilization. To most, he was just another human scout, a medic trained to keep soldiers alive when firefights tore them apart. To the wider galaxy, however, his name had begun to circulate in hushed tones, always paired with the same impossible rumor, that the Drekker, the apex predator feared across 100 star systems, walked with him. The forest around him was a graveyard of war. Scorched trees still oozed sap, and the earth was blackened where plasma fire had swept through weeks before. Cale moved without hurry, his eyes always scanning, but his focus wasn't on enemies or traps. He was listening. Out here, silence was dangerous. Alien soldiers had their own stories about the Drekker, told in mess halls after too much drink. A scaled beast with wings like tattered banners, talons sharper than plasma blades, and a roar that shattered the resolve of entire battalions. One unit claimed their artillery simply stopped working when the Drekker appeared, as though the beast itself bent the universe around it. Others swore the ground shook with each step it took. What all the stories agreed upon was this: no one ever survived an encounter. Cale had heard them too, though he never corrected the details. He had seen Vare, the creature they feared, and he knew those stories didn't capture the truth. The Drekker wasn't a phantom or a force of nature. It was flesh and blood, capable of pain, capable of trust. But explaining that to anyone else? They would sooner call him mad than believe it. Night drew close, and Cale found a hollow where the trees formed a broken canopy, enough cover to set a small camp. He moved efficiently, pulling free a collapsible stove, unsealing rations, checking his medical kit with the quiet precision of habit. Every motion kept him grounded. For weeks, he had traveled without speaking a word to another soul, and the silence pressed down on him heavier than the pack on his shoulders. He had just struck his fire starter when he felt it, the shift in the air, the deep tremor in the ground. A shiver crawled across his skin, the kind every living thing in the galaxy knew by instinct. The predator was near. Cale didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back against a half-burned tree and waited. The shadows stretched, the forest hushed, and then it came. Vare emerged from the darkness like a nightmare-given form. Its scaled hide shimmered with a faint glow of bioluminescence, patterns of molten gold across charcoal black. Its wings folded close to its body, their torn edges dragging faintly along the ground. Each talon pressed into the earth with the weight of inevitability, carving scars into the soil. Its eyes, amber, slit-pupiled, filled with intelligence and a predator's hunger, locked on Cale. A dozen alien soldiers had once collapsed in terror at the sight alone. Cale simply nodded. "You're late." The Drekker rumbled, a sound that vibrated the air like thunder, and lowered itself onto its haunches. It moved with the grace of a killing machine, muscles coiled and ready to strike, yet when it reached the humans' camp, it didn't attack. Instead, it circled once, curling its massive body around the perimeter, wings folding tight, until its head rested a mere arm's length from Cale's boots. Its eyes closed slowly. A sound halfway between a growl and a sigh rolled from its throat. Cale reached for a strip of dried meat, tossing it onto the ground. One amber eye cracked open, the jaws parted, and with delicate precision the beast snapped it up. Then, unbelievably, it settled again, chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Elsewhere in the galaxy, entire fleets still told tales of the Drekker. They said it could not be reasoned with, could not be stopped, could not be tamed. That it was death incarnate, prowling the void for prey. And yet here it lay, curled like a watchful hound beside a single man, its breath stirring the ashes of Cale's fire. Cale pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders. His hand brushed against the worn leather strap that held his medic satchel, the same strap he had used years ago to bind Vare's shattered wing, when he had first found the predator bleeding and broken, half dead in the ruins of a battlefield. He said nothing to the creature now. Words weren't needed. The bond between them was older than language, older than the council's fear or the soldiers' laughter. The flames flickered, shadows dancing over scaled hide. The galaxy's nightmare dreamed beside him, and Cale closed his eyes, though he did not yet sleep. He knew they would come soon. Soldiers, hunters, opportunists who thought they could seize the impossible for themselves. Let them. For tonight, in this silent, ruined forest, man and predator rested together. And somewhere, far beyond the treeline, whispers carried on the wind. The Drekker had been seen again, not as a terror in the dark, but as the guardian of a human. Tomorrow the galaxy would come for him. Tonight, the galaxy's deadliest predator slept at his side. Kale woke before dawn, the faintest sliver of light breaking through the ruined canopy overhead. The air was sharp with the scent of ash and resin, and the forest was quiet, too quiet. He shifted carefully, glancing at the hulking shape beside him. Ver's chest rose and fell with a slow, steady rhythm, each exhale a soft growl that stirred the embers of last night's fire. Even in sleep, the Drekker radiated menace, its claws glinting in the pale light, its wings curled protectively around the human camp. Kale sat up, pulling his boots tighter, his every movement practiced and quiet. He knew the silence wasn't natural. The forest had fallen into the predator's shadow, but something else lurked beyond it. He could feel the weight of eyes on him. Not long after, the watchers revealed themselves. 4 figures emerged from the treeline, weapons half raised, their armor patterned in the gray and green colors of the Verati clans. The Verati were mercenaries, opportunists, always hungry for coin and reputation. Kale recognized them immediately by their jagged helmets and the cruel edges of their blade rifles. They had the lean, angular builds of creatures bred for hunting across starless wastes. Their leader stepped forward, visor retracting to reveal a scarred face and a sharp grin. "So it's true," the alien said, voice rough like gravel. "The human keeps company with death itself." His eyes flicked toward the sleeping Drekker, then back to Kale. "You'll forgive us if we don't believe the stories. We'll take our proof." Kale didn't move. "You've already made your mistake." The Verati laughed, a harsh, barking sound, echoed by his companions. "You expect me to believe that thing obeys you? It would sooner peel the flesh from your bones. No beast that hunts fleets would lower itself to lie at the feet of prey." Kale held the mercenary's gaze, saying nothing. The alien lifted his rifle, gesturing toward the Drekker. "Wake it. Let us see who commands whom. Or should I cut you down first and watch it tear us apart?" Ver stirred. The low rumble that rolled from its chest vibrated through the ground, shaking loose a dusting of ash from the burned branches overhead. One amber eye opened, slitted pupil narrowing as it locked on the intruders. The Verati froze, bravado bleeding out of them in an instant. The leader swallowed hard but forced a sneer back onto his face. "Posturing," he muttered. "It's just protecting its territory." The Drekker uncoiled in a single motion, wings unfurling with a thunderous snap that sent a gale through the clearing. The mercenaries stumbled back, their armor clattering as the beast loomed above them, scales glimmering like molten metal. It lowered its head, lips curling to reveal teeth long enough to pierce armor. One of the Verati panicked and fired. The shot glanced harmlessly off Ver's chest, leaving only a scorched mark on the scales. The Drekker's roar shook the ground, a deafening sound that sent birds scattering miles away. The mercenaries dropped into defensive stances, but fear gripped their movements. Kale stepped forward, placing a single hand on the Drekker's foreleg. "Ver," he said softly. The beast stilled. Its growl cut off, the tension in its coiled muscles easing. The mercenary stared in disbelief as the Drekker lowered its head, waiting, its fangs inches from Kale's shoulder. Kale didn't flinch. He simply rested his hand against the scaled hide, then gestured toward the forest. "Go," he told the intruders. The Verati leader hesitated, pride warring with fear. But the way the predator's gaze tracked his every twitch stripped him of any illusion of dominance. He spat onto the ash and jerked his head. His squad backed away, rifles still half raised but their steps uneven, retreating into the trees until the forest swallowed them whole. Ver's gaze followed them, but when Kale lowered his hand, the predator eased back down, folding its wings again. Its chest rumbled with a low growl that carried no malice, only watchfulness. Kale let out a breath. He knew what would come next. The Verati would not stay silent. They would carry their story across outposts and cantinas, turning whispers into wildfire. By nightfall, every soldier and mercenary within 100 systems would know that the Drekker had been seen again, and worse, that it had obeyed a human. He crouched by the fire, stoking the embers with deliberate calm. It would happen sooner or later. He had never tried to hide what Ver was, only to keep moving, to live quietly on the fringes where neither council patrols nor mercenary bands stayed long. But now the galaxy would turn its eyes toward him again as it always did. Ver shifted beside him, curling its body closer, the heavy weight of its head settling into the earth near Kale's boots. The predator's eyes closed, but Kale knew it wasn't asleep. It was waiting, as it always did, for whatever threat came next. Kale tore a strip of dried rations and tossed it near the beast's snout. The jaws snapped shut around it with precise control, careful not to brush his boots. He couldn't help a faint smile. The galaxy feared Vare as an unstoppable engine of destruction. To him, it was something else entirely, a reminder that not everything in the universe could be understood by fear or force. The forest grew quiet again, though this time the silence felt heavier, full of the echoes of what had just transpired. Somewhere beyond the treeline, the Verati would already be spreading their tail, voices shaking though they tried to dress their terror in mockery. By tomorrow, Kale knew, others would come. They always did. He leaned back against the charred trunk and closed his eyes, letting the rhythm of Vare's breathing steady his own. The storm had only begun to gather. And yet, here in the ruins of a burned forest, human and predator rested together, daring the galaxy to try and tear them apart. The chamber of the Galactic Council was a vast amphitheater suspended in orbit above a dying star, its fractured light bleeding crimson across the polished obsidian floor. Delegates from 100 species filled the tiers, their voices a low and uneasy chorus. Every counselor present had heard the same reports, carried in by trembling mercenaries and intercepted transmissions. The Drekker had been seen again, and this time it did not roam free. It lay beside a human. The presiding voice, Chancellor Vaith of the Vorin, raised her silvered staff, and silence rippled through the hall. Her eyes, pale and unblinking, swept across the gathered assembly. We stand upon the edge of calamity. The predator we swore could never be bound has been witnessed at rest, obedient, beside a man of earth. We must decide whether this rumor is mere delirium or a threat so grave it cannot be ignored. Murmurs rose immediately. A reptilian delegate hissed that the Verati mercenaries were known exaggerators, while another, a feathered envoy from the Zalari, countered that the mercenaries had fled battle rather than profit. Fear was painted on every face no matter how they tried to mask it. The Drekker was not just a beast to them, it was a symbol of chaos, the embodiment of all they could not control. From a lower tier, Commander Ralvek rose. Tall, broad-shouldered, armored even in this place of politics, he carried himself with the certainty of a soldier who had earned victories the council depended on. His skin was slate gray, marked with pale scars that traced from jaw to collarbone, and his eyes were sharp as drawn steel. He bowed only slightly, enough to show respect without conceding authority. You waste words debating whether this tale is true, he said, his voice cutting through the chamber. I have fought on the edge of Drekker hunting grounds. I have watched platoons scatter at a single roar. The predator is real and it is unstoppable. If even a fragment of this story is accurate, if it truly lies at the side of a human, then that human is the most dangerous being alive. The chamber stirred uneasily. Ralvek continued. We cannot allow it. One man should not wield what entire fleets fear. You speak of calamity, Chancellor, but calamity has already begun. The longer we hesitate, the stronger the legend grows. We must act. A soft, trembling voice rose from another tier. An aged Kithari scientist, his carapace dull with age, spoke with fragile authority. Commander, forgive my boldness, but what you suggest is absurd. The Drekker cannot be controlled. It has no master. Our archives show a dozen failed attempts, beasts that turned on those who tried to claim them. This human, perhaps he stumbled into coincidence. The predator tolerates his presence, nothing more. Ralvek's lips curved into a humorless smile. Coincidence does not stay a Drekker's claws when rifles are raised. Coincidence does not silence its roar at a single word. He let the silence hang, then added, coincidence does not make mercenaries flee without profit. The Chancellor struck her staff again, and the chamber quieted. Commander Ralvek speaks to our fears, though fear alone cannot decide our course. Still, we cannot dismiss what has been seen. We must learn the truth. Outside the chamber, Kale Draven remained unaware of the debates tearing through the galaxy's highest halls. He sat by another campfire, carefully stitching a split in Vare's wing membrane where plasma had seared it days before. The Drekker endured the treatment with eerie patience, every muscle taut yet still, as though understanding the care being given. Kale's hands moved steadily, but his thoughts circled the memory of the Verati hunters and the way their terror had transformed into certainty. He knew word would spread. He knew the council would hear it soon if they had not already. Ralvek, meanwhile, lingered after the session, summoned into the Chancellor's private chamber. The room was sparse, lit only by the dying star beyond the viewport. You will lead the operation, Vaith said, her tone brooking no argument. Find this human. Bring him to us alive. If he resists, break him. But do not slay him unless there is no choice. The council must see with its own eyes. Ralvek inclined his head, though his jaw tightened. And the beast? If possible, separate it. If not, destroy it. The galaxy cannot afford to tremble before prey and predator alike. Ralvek accepted the command without hesitation. Yet as he departed, a knot formed deep in his chest, one he would not admit aloud. He had spent a lifetime measuring strength, both his own and that of his enemies. He had faced horrors on a dozen battlefronts. But the thought of a human standing unafraid beside the Drekker unsettled him in a way no battlefield ever had. Kale finished his work on the wing, sealing the final stitch with a cauterizing spark. Vare flexed, testing, then folded the wing close again with a low rumble. Kale leaned back, wiping his hands, and let his gaze linger on the massive predator. He remembered the first time he had found it, bleeding and alone in the wreckage of a battlefield. He remembered how it had bared its teeth, ready to tear him apart, and how he had knelt anyway, binding its wounds with nothing but emetic stubbornness. He did not pretend to understand why it had chosen to stay. Perhaps because he had not tried to force it. Perhaps because, unlike the Council, he had not looked at it as a weapon to be owned or a terror to be destroyed. He had looked at it and seen something broken, and he had chosen to heal it. The Drekker's amber eyes opened, watching him with a gaze that felt more human than beast. Kale reached out, pressing his palm lightly against the scaled hide, and for a moment the silence between them was not silence at all, but a bond older than language. Beyond the forest, in the void above the dying star, Ralvek's fleet gathered. Warships aligned into formation, their hulls gleaming with the insignia of the Council. Orders spread like wildfire. The hunt had begun. The galaxy no longer debated whether the Drekker obeyed a man. The galaxy was moving to prove it, or to bury the truth beneath fire and steel. The first sign of the Council's arrival was the silence. Birds that had returned to the burned forest scattered in panicked bursts, their wings vanishing into the dusk. Then came the low thrum of engines, steady and growing, until the ground beneath Kale's boots vibrated with their presence. He rose from his crouch, eyes narrowing at the flickers of light piercing through the tree-line. Vare raised its head, a deep growl rolling from its chest, wings unfurling slightly as though the very air carried warning. Kale rested a hand on its flank, steadying the creature though his own pulse hammered. He had known this moment would come. The Verati had not fled to vanish. They had fled to spread their tail. And now the galaxy had sent its answer. The forest glowed as dropships descended, their hulls etched with the insignia of the Council. Soldiers poured from the ramps in disciplined lines, weapons raised, visors scanning. They moved with precision, neither mercenaries nor opportunists, but trained men and women under a commander's hand. Kale recognized the posture of soldiers who did not underestimate their quarry. From the largest ship, Commander Ralvek stepped into the clearing. His armor caught the firelight, etched with battle scars, his stance unyielding. He studied Kale not as one studies prey, but as a general studies an equal who has yet to reveal his hand. Kale Draven, Ralvek called, voice carrying across the ruin. By order of the Galactic Council, you are commanded to surrender yourself for questioning. Do so peacefully and your life will be spared. Kale gave a dry, humorless smile. Funny. You say questioning but you mean containment. And if I refuse? Ralvek's eyes flicked toward Vare, who now towered above Kale, wings arching high enough to blot out what little light the forest still offered. Then you and that creature die together. No beast, no man, no legend is greater than the will of the Council. The Drekker bared its teeth, the sound of its growl reverberating through the clearing. Soldiers flinched despite their training. Kale felt the tension rising like a tide. He stepped forward, his voice even but firm. I didn't ask for this. I didn't claim it. I saved its life, nothing more. If that threatens your Council, maybe the Council should be afraid of itself. Ralvek raised a hand. Squads moved into position, encircling the clearing, rifles humming as their capacitors charged. Kale's stomach tightened, but his voice did not waver. Vare, he said quietly. The Drekker stilled, waiting. The first shot came from a soldier too nervous to obey restraint. Plasma seared through the air, striking Vare's shoulder. The forest erupted into chaos. Vare roared, the sound shattering branches and rattling teeth, then surged forward. Its wings beat once, a gale flattening soldiers and scattering them like leaves. Talons crashed down, tearing through metal and stone alike. Kale moved with practiced calm amid the storm, ducking low, weaving between the Drekker's massive legs. He didn't give commands beyond a single word or gesture, but Vare responded as if tethered to his will. Where Kale pointed it struck. Where Kale signaled it withheld. Soldiers fired in desperate bursts, but their weapons barely scratched its hide. Each movement of the beast was a reminder of why entire fleets had fled before it. Ralvek waded into the battle with ruthless efficiency, his blade rifle switching seamlessly between searing bolts and jagged steel. He cut down his own fallen men when Vare loomed too close, sparing them from worse fates. His eyes never left Kale, even as the predator's shadow swept across him. Kale ducked behind a broken tree trunk, pulling free a small pack of field charges. He wasn't a warrior by nature, but a medic who knew the terrain of survival. He planted the charges into the soil, then lured soldiers toward them with deliberate, visible movements. When they advanced, he triggered the detonators. Earth and flame erupted, scattering their formation. Vare swept through the gap, wings battering soldiers aside without lethal precision. Kale had not commanded slaughter, and the Drekker obeyed, maiming rather than killing when it could. That restraint unsettled Ralvek more than any carnage. The commander pressed forward until the battle brought him face to face with Kale. They stood mere paces apart, the Drekker circling them both like a storm contained. "You hide behind it," Ralvek said, blade dripping with molten sparks. "Without the beast you are nothing." Kale's expression hardened. "Without me it would be dead." Ralvek lunged, blade sweeping in a lethal arc. Kale ducked, the strike splitting bark where his head had been. He scrambled back, using the terrain, forcing Ralvek to chase him through fallen trunks and jagged stone. Every move was deliberate, every step measured. Kale wasn't stronger, but he was faster, more adaptable. He had spent years navigating battlefields not as a soldier, but as the one who survived when soldiers fell. Vare surged toward Ralvek, but Kale shouted a single word. The Drekker froze mid-strike, claws hovering inches from the commander. Ralvek's eyes widened as he realized the truth. Kale was not a shielded coward hiding behind a monster. The monster obeyed him. The commander's composure faltered, just for a heartbeat, and Kale pressed the advantage. He snatched a fallen soldier's stun pike, driving its charge into the earth between them. Electricity arced upward, forcing Ralvek back a step. The two men locked eyes, predator and prey in their own right, though which was which blurred with every passing second. Around them, the battle slowed, soldiers faltering as they saw Vare waiting for Kale's command, not acting on instinct. The legend of the Drekker was unmaking itself before their eyes, reshaping into something even more dangerous: choice. An orbital strike flared above, fire raining down from the council's ships. Kale shouted, and Vare moved without hesitation, throwing its wings wide to shield him from the blast. The impact tore through trees and stone, searing air, but when the fire faded, Kale still stood, protected by the very creature that should have devoured him. Ralvek stared, breathing hard, his blade lowered. Soldiers around them broke formation, torn between fear and awe. Kale touched the Drekker's flank, steadying it as smoke curled from its scales. His voice carried, clear despite the ruin around him. "This isn't control," he said. "This is trust. And if you think your council can cage that, you've already lost." Ralvek said nothing. His silence was louder than any roar, and Kale knew the battle was over, not by blood but by revelation. Above, the warships hovered uncertainly, their fire withheld. On the ground, the soldiers looked to their commander for orders. Ralvek's jaw clenched, his scarred face unreadable, but his eyes betrayed the fracture of certainty. The Drekker lowered its head, curling once more beside the human. Around them, smoke drifted, silence creeping back into the ruined forest. The fight had ended, but Kale knew it was only the beginning. The council had seen enough to fear, yet not enough to understand. And as he rested his hand against the predator's scaled hide, he realized the galaxy would not stop until it learned the answer to a question that frightened even him. Why had the deadliest predator alive chosen him? Beneath the fractured canopy of alien stars, the battlefield lay smoldering. Ash hung heavy in the air, broken only by the thrum of engines from orbit above. The coalition forces had faltered, retreating in panic after witnessing the impossible, the galaxy's most feared predator kneeling at the side of a human. Whispers had already carried the story across fleets and stations alike. Some dismissed it as rumor, others as propaganda, but those who had faced the creature firsthand could not deny what they saw. Terran crouched beside the beast, his hand resting on the thick hide that pulsed with restrained power. Once, this creature had been spoken of in hushed tones, described as the eater of kings, the destroyer of armies. Yet now it lay calm, breathing slowly, its eyes, bright and molten, fixed on him. Around them alien soldiers remained frozen in uncertainty, unwilling to press forward, unwilling to flee. The air was a stalemate of fear and awe. "Easy," Terran murmured, voice steady despite the storm inside his chest. His fingers brushed a scar across the predator's flank, one it had earned long before him. In that moment, man and monster breathed as one, their unity radiating a defiance that no weapon could match. For the first time, the galaxy's most powerful armies realized they were not facing a lone human, they were facing something greater. The coalition commander, a towering figure draped in ceremonial armor, stepped forward with trembling precision. His war mask concealed his expression, but his voice wavered with disbelief. How does it obey you? We spend generations hunting it. Entire fleets reduced to ruin. And yet, his words faltered as the predator bared its teeth, not in rage but in warning. Terran rose, dust streaking his uniform, eyes burning with conviction. You saw it yourself. It doesn't obey me. It chooses me. There's a difference. He let the silence hang heavy as stone, then added, and that choice changes everything. The commander shifted uneasily. Soldiers glanced at one another, weapons lowering ever so slightly. For them, the legend of the predator was not myth but blood-stained truth. Entire lineages had been extinguished attempting to kill it, entire wars fought to contain it. To see it resting beside a human felt like heresy, a violation of the natural order. From the shadows of the ruined settlement, survivors began to emerge. Humans and alien civilians alike stared in disbelief at the sight before them. A child, small and trembling, dared to step closer. The predator's gaze flickered toward the boy, and every soldier tensed, fingers tightening on triggers. But the creature only lowered its head, exhaling a breath that ruffled the child's hair. Gasps broke the tension, and in that fragile moment the universe shifted. Eric, bruised and bloodied but unbroken, moved to Terran's side. His eyes, sharp as blades, scanned the crowd. "They're rattled," he muttered under his breath. "Press it now before doubt hardens back into resolve." Terran nodded. His voice rose, firm enough to cut through the smoke and fear. "You've all seen what your fleets could not tame. You know the truth your leaders hid from you, that strength doesn't come from fear, from endless conquest, from chaining others. Strength comes from trust, from bonds that cannot be broken. This creature chose me not because I'm stronger than it, but because I offered it something your empires never did. Respect." The word struck harder than any blade. Murmurs spread among the ranks. Some soldiers lowered their helmets, ashamed. Others stared at Terran with dawning recognition. The commander raised his hand as if to silence the growing unrest, but hesitation lingered in his movement. His authority, once absolute, now trembled under the weight of what the soldiers had seen. "You would have us kneel to a man who tames nightmares?" he demanded, though even he could not summon full conviction. Eric stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Terran, his voice carrying iron. "No, not kneel. Stand with. Because if this human and this predator can find common ground, then what excuse do any of you have?" The silence that followed was electric. The predator, as though sensing the weight of the moment, rose to its full height. Its presence towered over all, yet it leaned ever so slightly toward Terran as though acknowledging his place. The soldiers could not look away. The galaxy's deadliest beast had declared its allegiance not with violence, but with loyalty. Then the first weapon clattered to the ground. A soldier of the coalition stepped forward, dropping to one knee not in submission, but in recognition of a truth that could no longer be denied. Others followed, until the clang of metal echoed like a drumbeat of change. The commander stood rigid, pride warring with fear, tradition clashing with the undeniable. His grip on his weapon tightened, then slowly loosened. With a hollow sound it fell from his hand. "So be it," he whispered, voice thick with defeat and awe. For the first time in centuries the predator did not stand alone. Later, as the fires dimmed and the stars burned above, Terran and Eric sat at the edge of the ruined field. The predator lay beside them, its steady breathing a reminder of the impossible bond they now shared. "Do you think they'll follow?" Eric asked, his tone quieter now, almost reverent. Terran gazed into the distance, where soldiers and civilians alike mingled without the rigid lines of conquest separating them. "They already are. The galaxy doesn't need another tyrant. It needs something worth believing in." He reached out, brushing his hand along the predator's massive shoulder. "And it starts here." Eric chuckled softly, though weariness weighed on him. "Never thought I'd see the day. You, me, and the terror of the stars sitting like old comrades." Terran smiled faintly, eyes reflecting the glow of embers. Maybe that's what terrified them most. Not that it could kill them, but that it could choose not to. The predator stirred, pressing its great head gently against Terran's side, a gesture so simple yet so profound it made the alien night seem brighter. Around them, the seeds of change had been planted in the most unlikely of soil, fear transformed into trust, bloodshed into unity. And so the story spread, carried faster than any ship, told in whispers across taverns and barracks, broadcast in defiance of the empires that sought to silence it. The tale of the predator who had once terrified the galaxy but chose to sleep peacefully beside a human. It became more than legend. It became a promise. And promises once believed in could shake the stars themselves.